So here's what I want to do today. There are 4 wrestlers or 4 wrestling personalities, 4 wrestling legends. The Undertaker, Mark Calloway. I want to go back and listen to his interview with Joe Rogan where he said wrestlers were salt. Really analyze what he said and determine if he's right or wrong. Same thing goes for Dutch Mantell, Mark Henry, and of course, everyone's favorite grandpa, Jim Cornette. I kid. But for real, Jim Cornette is one of the greatest minds in wrestling. Clearly, he knows what he's talking about. That being said, keep this in mind. This is only my opinion. I am one person with one take. I invite all of you to give me your takes on this subject because I think different views from different generations will really make this an interesting topic. So let's kick things off with The Undertaker, aka Mark Calloway.
Can you enjoy it as a fan, or is it like, are you too close to it?
I try. It's tough right now for me. Because the product has changed so much, it's kind of soft.
Are you gonna get in trouble for saying that?
Probably. I probably piss a lot of people off, but they need to hear it. I mean, it is what it is. But to the young guys, he's a bitter old guy.
Right.
I'm not bitter. I did my time. I'm good. I walked away when I wanted to walk away. I just think the product is a little soft. There's guys here and there that have an edge to them, but there's too much pretty, not enough substance, I think, right now.
Back when he was a wrestler, you didn't see them do moonsaults. You didn't see them do 450s or 630s or all these dives and whatnot. It wasn't something that was seen as acrobatic. It was a fight. You had 2 men go in there and they got down. They threw fists, they hit their finisher. It was all about the fight. And sometimes those matches did not last long because in a real fight, they're not supposed to last long. Some of them are over in like a minute or 2. Like a Mike Tyson fight, if you will. And I somewhat get that mindset. I think in certain instances, matches nowadays can go a little too long. I'm looking at you, AEW. Seriously, some of these matches go unnecessarily longer than they really need to. So I can somewhat see where he's coming from with that, but let's continue.
Instead of playing to kids to be like, hey, look at this silly character, you're a kid, you'll enjoy this. The kids like me in grade school and high school were watching because it was wrong. It was like, oh my god, it's dark or it's crazy sexual, like the stuff DX used to do.
Yeah.
They would just make fun of each other harsher. The shit talking was harder. The storylines were tougher. Now it's like more of a big brand for a big network, and they don't have that edge that it used to have.
Look, I also grew up with DX. I also grew up with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and Hulk Hogan, Undertaker, Goldberg, Bret Hart, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys. I grew up with all of them as well. But even I have to admit, a lot of that is nostalgia. Sure, you'll never hear me say that the TLC match at WrestleMania 17 isn't one of the greatest ladder matches of all time. A match that set the bar way too high for tag team wrestling, something that will never ever be topped ever again. But I'm also self-aware enough to go, I had rose-tinted glasses back then. A lot of the things that I liked because I was young. And I still like them because it's nostalgia. But if I was born in this generation, I would be more likely to say the Young Bucks are the best tag team in the world, and their ladder match with the Lucha Bros is the greatest ladder match of all time. Just like everyone born in the 80s thinks the greatest ladder match was Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon. And to me, it's just a really good ladder match, but I understand the importance of it. That said, he does have a point about edgy TV. No one was watching more wrestling than we were in the 90s. During the Monday Night Wars, WCW, and the Attitude Era, that was the period when wrestling was at its hottest. The highest ratings on television, and it hasn't come close ever since. Because there's something to be said about things feeling real. And I think that's something that this generation could use a little bit more of. Things that feel real and not staged. At least some things that'll make people go, okay, I know this wrestling thing is staged and all, but that was real. We don't see that enough.
And it's always been this way, but they're trying to put something out for everybody. Mm-hmm. You know what? They're just like, some guys, are into the comedy shit, and then there's other guys that want to see the hardcore, more hardcore type fighting. What I think one of the big things that happened is that the generation before, we all got old at the same time, there weren't enough guys to work with the young guys. I mean, we can sit and talk and, I can give you my theories on what you should do, or, you should do this, or maybe you should try this. But until you actually can get in the ring and actually do it, it doesn't really translate a lot of times.
And I do think it sucks that a lot of the wrestlers from the Attitude Era ultimately ended up leaving at the exact same time. Austin and Rock both had 5 years on top. Neither one of them stayed past the newer generation. Shawn Michaels came back, but even he had to retire at some point. We lost Eddie Guerrero. We lost Chris Benoit. We lost a lot of names from that generation. A lot of them either had to retire early because their bodies couldn't handle it, or they passed away. And it sucks knowing that a Mick Foley never got a chance to work with any of the top stars in today's generation. And the same thing goes for a Bret Hart, for a Triple H, for many, many, many others. Now, do we have some veterans? Absolutely. Edge comes to mind. Rey Mysterio comes to mind. Chris Jericho, Sting. But a lot of those names only show up part-time. They're not working full-time with this generation. And that absence can be felt, and it does suck that these wrestlers don't have access to that wisdom. They don't have access to that knowledge. The small things that the legends did that made them go from being a regular wrestler to a legend in the business. And I also agree with the take that wrestling nowadays is trying too hard to appease everybody. Wrestling to me is an adult violent sport. It's not supposed to be for kids. I'm not saying you can't have wrestlers that appeal to kids, but the whole idea is it's an adult sport. It needs blood. I don't see how you can have a simulated fight and not have any kind of blood whatsoever. It needs to be there. I'm not saying it needs to be in every match, but you name me one real fight that doesn't have someone gushing blood somewhere. And that also ties into what Taker was talking about, it being too clean. A real fight isn't clean. And let's keep this in mind. Undertaker is somebody that made a living off of going to bars and starting fights. He was well known for putting a lot of people in their places. He was not someone that anyone screwed with. Also, when it comes to his definition of soft, Taker is someone that has wrestled with tons and tons of injuries. He has broken and torn every possible ligament in your body. And when you have a guy like that saying you're soft, you should probably take that with a grain of salt, because his version of soft is not soft. Hell, you could hit him with a car, he'll get right back up and say, that tickled. They call him the dead man for a reason. Okay, let's do Dutch Mantel next. Let's see what he has to say about this generation.
All the wrestlers today, Undertaker said, are soft.
Of course they're soft. Most of them have never been in a fight. And I've told you this on this show before, that Cornette one day, he was talking to a group of them and to the trainees at NXT, and he asked, how many of you have been in a real fight? You know how many raised their hands?
Not many.
2.
Wow.
And one of them was a girl. So if you've never been in a real fight, I mean, John, how many real fights you been in?
Oh, quite a few.
Me too.
Quite a few. Yep.
And they don't last long. And you know, when you get in a fight, that adrenaline starts flowing. But if you've never had that flowing, you don't know what it feels like. It's not something you train for. It's going to be there automatically, or it should be. But so these guys are going to go out there and pretend to engage in a serious competition. And I was trying to watch some crap today, some independent guys, and this guy was leapfrog and do this and take the headlock. And I wish I was there. I'd have went out there and I'd slapped every one of them. I mean, I couldn't now, but I would before. Because I don't know who's training these guys. I really don't. And I agree with Taker. You know, Taker was the guy you didn't mess with either. He didn't say much. I was in a bar with him one time, and we was in the back, and he said, I got to go to the little boy's room. So he was gone quite a while, and I said, I better go look for him. So as I walk up front, you know, and I heard a commotion to my left. And I looked over there, and I saw all the bouncers there, and then I saw Mark. I went, what the fuck? And I run up to him. I said, what'd you do? He said, nothing. There's a guy laying there, knocked out. And I said, well, we got to go, buddy. We got to go.
And there you go. Wrestling back then, let's just call it like it was. A lot of the people in the business were the red-headed stepchildren of society. They weren't normal. That is what they thought was what people wanted to see. Real fights. Real fights didn't include all these holds. People got in there, they hit them, they bled, and we had a winner. Now, I will say one thing that resonated with me when it comes to Dutch Mantel. If you don't know what it's like to be in a real fight, you have no idea what it looks like. You have no idea what it feels like. And if you don't know what it feels like, what it looks like, you can't sell properly. I can tell you firsthand, I would not last 30 minutes inside the ring. I'm out within 3. That being said, there is an extreme side to it as well. This is still entertainment. Not every fight has to be just fists. I see nothing wrong with flips and kicks and spots. I only have a problem with it when every match looks the same. That's why you gotta have a variety. You gotta have hardcore wrestling. You gotta have high-flying wrestling. You gotta have tag team wrestling. You gotta have women's wrestling. And then you gotta have that ground and pound technical wrestling masterpiece. A little bit of everything. That is what people are looking for. Variety. That's what makes entertainment entertainment. Okay, let's move on to Mark Henry. Now, Mark Henry is somebody that I have the utmost respect for. He is definitely a veteran in the business, a former world champion. But what I like about Mark Henry is that he's young enough to relate to the younger generation. So I'm curious to know what he had to say about Undertaker's comments.
What he meant was guys were more loose cannons, guys were a little bit more uninhibited back then, and you know, there were guys that would stab you. There were guys that would shoot you if they felt like they can get away with it. And today, we're a corporate entity now. Right. There were no drug policies. Think about how many guys no-showed, or guys that they got drugged up and they couldn't walk to the ring. Yeah. And then they said, oh, we need somebody else, and like not being reliable. The only way the business was ever going to change and that it was going to get controlled to where it was looked at as a legitimate, tangible business that you can actually trade on the stock market is if you got rid of all those guys. Right. And that's what happened. Yeah. I don't see nothing wrong with that. You get to that point to where all of those people that you try to publicly trade something on the stock market, you can't trust them to do the right thing. So you have to say, let me get somebody that can. Did you know at WWE, at one point, there was 32 guys that had college degrees?
No, I didn't.
32. And 2 PhDs.
Wow.
So that, you go back 30 years of pro wrestling, there was no college graduates in wrestling.
They couldn't write PhD.
I mean, that basically spells it for you. To me, that was a great summation of this generation compared to the old generation. The way life was back then is completely different now. The fact that most of the wrestlers in WWE and AEW have undergraduate degrees, like he said, says it all. What these wrestlers had to do to get through the day, these wrestlers were fighting for their lives during the Attitude Era. If one show was off, if they did not bring their A game, they would go out of business. And also keep in mind, it was a Shark Tank. You wasn't getting TV time if you wasn't good, because you were competing against Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, D-Generation X, and then also the women. You really had to be a shark, someone that did not play games if you were going to survive back then. You don't need to do that now. There's plenty of TV time for everybody. Nowadays, you have 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of NXT, 2 hours of SmackDown, and then you also got pay-per-views. Again, that's just WWE. You also got AEW. There's tons of TV time to go around. So there's no real need to be a shark. We have enough for everybody. Okay, let's close it off with Jim Cornette.
I think it's a byproduct of having television writers coming into the business rather than in professional wrestling, you had bookers. And those bookers made matches based on the personalities. You know, people knew Kenny, and they knew what he was about, and they knew, you know, what made him tick, and they knew Jim, and they knew what I was about, and they knew what made me tick, and they knew that if they got us together, we would have just a natural personal rivalry because we are two different people, so we wouldn't like each other. and we would be fighting over a championship or over money or over prestige. Now it's just so overly contrived that it's become a television product, and it comes from, you know, the TV writers having to put a story in. That fucking idiot Ed Ferrara one time. They had Marlena. Remember when Marlena was with Goldust, and then somehow Marlena was pregnant, and then somehow Marlena got knocked off the apron and had a miscarriage, right? Which to me, and I went up to him, I said, Ed, I said, what the fuck is this all about? Why would you do that? I said, nobody wants to see that shit. I said, for one thing, I said, you've been knocking them over the head with the fact that this shit's phony for so long. They probably didn't believe she was pregnant to begin with. Therefore, the people who didn't believe she was pregnant, now you said she'd had a miscarriage, so the people don't believe that either. So they're just saying you're just capitalizing, you know, you're doing a fake miscarriage for the sake of a story. That's in bad taste. If anybody did believe she was pregnant and got knocked off the ring and had a miscarriage, that's in bad taste. What about the people who have their wives or girlfriends or mothers or family members have had miscarriages? They don't want to fucking see that on their wrestling. It didn't sell any tickets. It didn't sell any pay-per-views. Well, this would be a story on any primetime network drama program. Well, this ain't a primetime network drama program, you little short, fat motherfucker.
I just feel like there are certain things, for me personally, that are just in poor taste, period. I'm all about edgy TV. I'm all about putting out taboo stuff that should not be shown. I think that, to me, is part of what made wrestling. That's not just a 90s thing. That's been going on since the beginning of time. Think about Gorgeous George. Do you think Gorgeous George was culture back then? Hell no. I think back to the bloody matches that were going on with Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik, Ric Flair and Terry Funk. Some of these matches were during a time where people thought wrestling was real and people were genuinely scared. That stuff I love. I love it when we bring in taboo things. Miscarriages, that's just bad taste. Who finds that entertaining? I agree with Jim Cornette from that standpoint. But I do kind of respect the fact that Vince Russo would always push the envelope and give us things that would not be okay for TV. The kind of stuff back then where you were flipping through channels and then you stopped and went, why is this guy being strung up backstage? Is he about to chop his? Oh my God. That's the kind of stuff I love. And I think we can use that again nowadays.
And I've been around this business all of my adult life and a lot of my teenage life, and what people that come into it and try to rape it and put the boots to it and make money off of it and go on and do other things, what they don't understand is that wrestling fans don't see Stone Cold Steve Austin played by Steve Williams. They see Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's not guys playing a part, playing a role, playing somebody else. It's guys being themselves. That's what wrestling fans want to see, because that's why the top stars get over. Ric Flair is Ric Flair. Steve Austin is Steve Austin. The Rock is The Rock. And so it's distasteful when you have to, you know, manipulate and manufacture all these different stories. So in answering your question, now that I've beat around the bush, it's different now. It was always about a story, but it was always about, in professional wrestling, it was about who's going to win the title, who's going to win the money, why are these guys mad? You know, they have a very simple issue that you can grasp. In sports entertainment, it's contrived and it's complicated, and chances are it's not really believable, and it's just another dramatic fucking horseshit, you know, teleplay. And that's why people watch it on TV for free a lot now, but they don't want to invest money in spending money to see what's going to happen, which is why the pay-per-view buy rates are going down, because it's not credible and believable. You don't believe these guys are really mad at each other. You know now that they're being told what to say and what to do, whereas that's sports entertainment. In pro wrestling, it wasn't so obvious that guys are being told what to say and what to do. And who wants to get behind a fucking hero that does and says what he's told? You want to get behind a guy who kicks ass and does what he wants to fucking do and doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks about it, right? That's a fucking hero, not somebody that goes. And just while I'm on the subject, when did it become a goddamn deal that you could just threaten these superstar wrestlers, we'll fire you and you'll be penniless? Well, they must not pay very fucking good if a guy can be fired and be penniless 6 weeks later. He's going to lose his fucking house and his wife will divorce him because he has no job. He's a goddamn major network television star. And you're telling me he's going to be broke because he goes 3 weeks without a fucking paycheck? It doesn't make sense. And that the promoters were always at the mercy in pro wrestling. We're always at the mercy of the top stars. When the heel wrestler would say, well, if you don't give me the match that I want, then I'm going to take your belt, Mr. Promoter, and I'm going to leave. And where will you be then without me to draw the crowds? Now it's like, we're the promoters. And if you don't do what we say, then we'll fire you and you'll be penniless and you'll be sweeping up garbage in the streets and giving blowjobs in the alley.
It can be a little too scripted. And when you know it's scripted, it doesn't feel as funny anymore. That's why people like CM Punk are still able to resonate with people, because you don't know what he's saying is real or scripted. 9 times out of 10, it's real. Everything is off the dome and he doesn't care who it pisses off. That realness is what people are drawn to. Everything Stone Cold Steve Austin said was real. He was not reading from a script. They gave him bullet points, he went out there and he said his thing. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, a lot of his catchphrases and lines were written out for him, but it didn't feel like it was. His delivery, his presence, the ability to command respect and have the audience eaten out of the palm of his hands, these are traits that made him one of the greatest of all time. So it's okay to have a writer, it's okay to have people backstage to help you come up with ideas to make this work. I just feel like at the end of the day, one thing we can all agree on is that wrestling needs to feel real. Because when it doesn't feel real, that is when it's at its worst. And yeah, we all know wrestling is scripted. We all know it's predetermined, but it's like a magic trick. When you go to a magic show, it's all bells and whistles. You know it's a trick, but you want to be submersed into it. You don't want people to come out and say, oh, that's an easy trick. Here's how he did it. No, no one cares about that. We want to be entertained. We want to go along with the show. Don't sit there and tell me magic's not real. I know it's not real. I don't care. I want to be submersed into the show regardless. Same thing with wrestling. And the best way to make people forget that what you're seeing is not real is to make it as real as possible. So when it comes down to it, I personally believe there are some things we can learn from the Jim Cornettes, from the Undertakers, from the Dutch Mantels, from those people that are really, really critical of wrestling. But does that mean they control every aspect of what the business is today? Absolutely not. The whole purpose of having the older generation is for them not to control how we live our lives, but for them to give us wisdom and guidance on how to carve our own paths. No one should be listening to Jim Cornette on how a show is supposed to be structured. That's not what he's there for. He's a great creative mind. He's great at wrestling psychology. In those ways, do you take his wisdom? But you name me one show Jim Cornette has done that sold out a stadium with 60,000 people. Don't worry, I'll wait. And as much as I respect The Undertaker for sacrificing his body for our entertainment, he ain't the only one that's worked through injuries. Seth Rollins right now is currently working with a well-known back injury that he's been dealing with since 2021. And he goes out there and still gives us 100%. And I guarantee you, if I line up every wrestler in WWE and AEW and ask them who here is dealing with some sort of injury, minor or major, all of them would raise their hand. They won't tell you they are because, well, number one, they most likely want to keep that under wraps so they don't miss TV time, but also, you can't be seen as tough if you're not willing to deal with some sort of pain. And every person that wrestles for a living has to deal with some amount of pain. Otherwise, why are you in the business? This generation of wrestlers might have some of the greatest performers to ever do it. There are some things I've seen done inside the ring over the last 10 years that I don't think anybody from the Attitude Era could come close to doing. Kenny Omega is a marvel inside the ring. MJF is the perfect combination of the past and the future. And we haven't even talked about the women yet. The Charlotte Flairs, the Becky Lynches, the Bianca Belairs, all of these people that were able to study all the takes from the past and harness that knowledge into creating the characters they are today. The great thing about wrestling is there are a variety of ways to make it work. And as long as you're resonating with the audience, that to me is what matters most about wrestling. So I'm just curious to know what you guys feel about this. Let me know down below in the comments how you feel about the old guard and what they have to say about the new generation. Do you feel like they're too hard on new gen, or do you feel like new gen needs to listen more to the old guard? Or maybe a combination of both. Regardless, thank you all so much for watching this video. Looking forward to your comments. As you follow out, do all the YouTube things, like the video, subscribe, and click that bell to catch all my content when it comes out. Follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and donate using PayPal, Patreon, Cashapp, and Venmo. Show love to the men and women that sacrifice their body for our entertainment. Because with the way things are with wrestling, you never know how long they'll be around. You guys have a good day. I'll catch you next time right here in Alyx's world. A place that is, was, and forever will be a safe space for wrestling fans like you. Peace.
Oh, when you're